I'm Carlene, and this is Diva Tonight. I have with me on Zoom the lovely Lynn Harris. She is the creator of Gold Comedy. She used to be a journalist, and we are going to be talking about all things comedy. So, how are you?
I'm good. I'm ready to talk about all things comedy. I think we need,
Yeah.
we're in some dark times, so, let's lighten it up.
Yeah, I feel like we are. It's kind of like I try not to watch the news too much, but it's unavoidable in a way. But I feel like
Yeah.
this will be a good little break from the everyday. So, from what I see, you have a background in journalism. So, from
Yeah.
journalism, which is like the serious side of things, what got you into journalism?
I've just always wanted to be some kind of writer and creator. And that, that can take and has taken many forms. And I think, journalism for sure requires serious skills, which I was fortunate to be able to develop over time. But it doesn't mean that everything you do is serious, or it doesn't mean that you always have to be serious in the sense of like boring. So I was fortunate enough to, get the chance to do it for I did it for about 25 years, and I still do. I never officially quit. I just moved on from that being my full-time job. Um so there are so many opportunities to develop. Well, if you're fortunate and you work hard, you get opportunities to develop your own voice, and which is which is great. Although I will say that it's also a super important skill to develop the capacity to write in other people's voices. Write one way for one magazine, one way for one newspaper, incredibly helpful skill. So it's not all about, self-expression, but I was also able to and encouraged to actually bring my own voice and even bring a humorous voice to issues that are not funny. And so it's which is also sort of a serious undertaking, figuring out like why would I write about, reproductive justice with some sarcastic humor? Or why would I write about the culture that enables sexual assault with humor? And what would that humor be? And how would that humor help to communicate about the issue? So you can really create opportunities um, to use humor in a way that still takes the job and the issue very seriously.
Speaking of comedy, I guess there's the stereotype behind, like, not the stereotype, but the typical person that would get into comedy, right? We have the
Yeah.
naturally talented comedian, like, one of my favorite comedians is Jim Carrey, because he's like,
Yeah.
so out of the box, right? But he's also known as a method actor, which I didn't know until later. And then you have Dave Chappelle, Robin Williams. So, as someone who runs a comedy school, do people feel like if they're going into comedy that there's this certain expectation?
Yeah. There is definitely a it's not the only notion, but there's definitely a prevailing notion or a common notion that people who are funny are the loud one. People who are funny are the one who gets to the joke first. People who are funny are the wacky one. People who are funny are the one who has like funny things happen to them. Or and it's not that those people aren't funny. It's that there are so many other ways to be funny. And and there's also a difference between being funny with your friends, or being funny at work, and being professionally funny. There's always like that, that dude. The dude is always like probably a white dude, who's probably just kind of like just like loud and stupid and kind of funny, but okay. And they're always like, Bruce, you should do stand up, you know, like not necessarily, Bruce. I'm not saying you're not funny, but there's a difference between being like kind of the doofus who gets laughs in real life and the person who really works at it and hones their skill. Now, Bruce could totally work at it and hone his skill, but just because he's funny, like at a party, doesn't mean he's funny on stage.
Whoa.
But
Okay.
the other way around is also true. That if you don't fit that like common notion of, and this is particularly true for women because we don't have, I mean, sure, and thank God there are tons of visible, well-known, hilarious women in comedy, whether they're in stand-up or sketch or whatever it is. But weirdly, I think still people still think that like, but I've got to be the loud, wacky one, even though like I'm like, have you met Aparna Nancherla? You know, she's one of my favorite comedians, and she's shy and anxious, and talks about how shy and anxious she is. I'm like, girl, if she can do it, you know, it's you like, did you see her? You don't have to be, you know, you don't have to be the loud, you don't have to be Bruce, you know. So the so the so the
Yeah.
difference is honestly the work, because because you because you there's people always ask me like, can you teach someone to be funny? I'm like, yes, because it's not teaching someone to be funny, it's teaching someone to figure out what's funny about themselves, and then encouraging them to practice and practice and practice and practice and learn the mechanics and get the genre and understand it. And of course, some people are like naturally better than others at certain things, the way some people are better athletes and some people are better cooks, like, of course. But at the same time, that's because they, do you know how much they practice? And do you know how much coaching they get? You know, so I
Yeah.
just like to encourage people that if they're curious about comedy, that whoever they already are is ready to try it out. And also, if they don't necessarily see themselves as performers, but they're still curious about comedy, do you know how many people it takes to make some comedy stuff? In other words, if you really don't see yourself as performing, but you want to be around comedy and like helping create comedy, do you know how much how in demand people who know how to edit video for comedy are, or people who know how to do lighting and sound and like production and all those things for like, you know, comedy shorts? Like those are people who are comedy creators. They're just not the ones performing, but they're still they're equally important to creating comedy. So I always like to say, like, do you have an idea that you're already ready now, and also how many different paths you could take?
Right. I guess the main thing is like a lot of people think people who work in comedy are mainly like who want to pursue it are going to be doing stand up, but there's other facets
Right.
of it. Obviously,
So
just like
many.
with film, there's many different
Right.
roles in film, and
Yep.
as an English major myself, we get typecast as like, well, why didn't you go to teachers college? You could have been a teacher. And I'm like, well, you know what? Teaching is not the only thing that you can do with an
Right.
English major, but I get what they're saying because most people think that, oh, well, you're studying
Right.
literature, so you could be a teacher. But um, that aside, so we're talking about like relationships and the relationships that women have. Like, a lot of my guests are in their 40s, and, sometimes people are starting a new career path or maybe
Right.
looking to expand their knowledge. So, um, I think you said this in our previous conversation that
Yeah.
stand up is not the only thing you can focus on with comedy. Like it could help with other things as well. Can you like elaborate on that? Like you were
You
saying,
mean,
like.
oh, like all the ways that doing stand up can help you do things in addition to stand up?
Yeah, like maybe
Yeah.
being like a public speaker or
Yes.
like you said, people in the medical field or like I
Yes.
guess other industries, right? Where
Mhm.
you can use the skill.
Yep. Yep. And you know, this is true for anyone, you know, when they're starting out, and they're, you know, this is true for anyone of any age, but I love to sort of situate this in the context of women in their 40s, 50s, whatever,
Yeah.
because it's so much more available to us, and I mean us, because I think 40s is young and adorable. So let's just leave it at that. But it's because like more and more we are less nervous about how we show, like what we look like. We're less nervous about failing, and by failing in comedy, I mean failing light. I mean LITE light. Like failing in
Hmm.
comedy is like a joke doesn't land, we don't care, we move on.